Hi. So I just wanted to kind of start by talking about my approach to making games, which is a little bit different than most people in that it takes forever and sometimes doesn't work very well. But I like to start with lots of graphics, lots of context, lots of character ideas, and this is kind of the backwards way of making games, because really the most efficient way of making games is to just come up with a really cool gameplay idea, prototype it. If it's not fun, throw it out, and then later figure out if there's a reason to add in story or graphical elements. So kind of like how Devin was talking about how he had all these sort of story ideas and they didn't really add much to the game, and he stripped it down and did sort of the core game. I'm kind of the opposite, where I like having all this weird stuff. So like one of the examples I guess would be Myst, which is a game that has almost no gameplay, and it's almost all context. It's just images, almost like a slideshow, and you're exploring a world that way. And I actually kind of like that game. I also like games that are really, really gameplay heavy. So I tend to try and want to mix both of those things together. So I'm actually working on a new project with a guy, and the funny thing, like, how I find collaborators is usually really random. Like, the guy I made Aquaria with, that game that Kevin was talking about, was just like a random /dot comment thread. And we worked on a game for 2 years and made a bunch of money and all this other stuff. So like, the recent guy I've been collaborating with on a side project is from Brazil, and I met him through Twitter because I just said, hey, does anyone want to help me make a series of Unity tutorials by creating some art? So this is some of his 3D art. And we just started working together, and magically we got on great, and we've been making tons of progress on this project. And hopefully next month we'll release something. We're hoping to Kickstarter it. And I'm not going to talk too much about it yet, but I'm going to use some content from that to basically throw together really quickly a game in Unity to demonstrate to you how quickly you can make stuff and how easily you can make stuff in Unity. So I already have a bunch of stuff in these folders that I'm going to basically put into this project here. And this is all stuff the guy in Brazil made. So to import stuff into a Unity project, like back in the old days, you would have to write your own code. You have to write a bunch of instructions for the computer on how to open images, how to open models, how to actually get stuff on the screen. But all I need to do now to import stuff is drag this. And then wait. Right, so now it's importing all that stuff. There it is. And now, okay, well, how do I see this stuff? Well, here it is. There it is. There's a model, right? So I've already got this model into my project. I can start doing stuff with it. So this is a little beach ball. This is the key, and this is a little punch toy guy. So basically, I'm just going to throw together some of these assets and see what kind of game I can come up with. So I'm going to drop the ball into my scene here. Now we're working with really limited resolution. So this is our 3D scene viewer here, so we can actually just go and pan around and look at things. There's some nice shortcuts where you can hit like F key to just look at different things in your scene, zoom around, stuff like that. So this is one of the first elements I'm going to work with is this ball. And I think the interesting thing to do with the ball is probably throw it. So I'm going to make it a physics object, and I'm basically just going to try and make a little game out of using this physics object and kind of just launching it around the scene and having it hit those little punch toy guys. So basically the way Unity works, it has this inspector on the side, and that's all the stuff that's attached to that ball object. So there's just all these different things. There's a transform thing, there's a mesh filter, there's a mesh renderer, all this kind of stuff. And you can go and learn how these things work, and I've done tutorials and other people have done tutorials. I don't really have time to explain it in too much detail, but basically just so you understand, I'm adding different components onto this game object to make it do different things. So I'm going to add a rigid body, which is something that makes an object become physical, becomes a physics object. I'm going to add a sphere collider. So if I just play the scene right now, I'm going to move my camera around a bit here because it's a bit far away from this thing. And it's really dark in here, so I'm just going to create a point light. And I got to move it. So you can see I'm lighting up this thing here. There we go. Now if I go and play this scene, the ball should just fall down. There, it fell really fast because gravity is turned up really high because our models are kind of small. So I'm just going to go in here, I'm going to tweak gravity if I can make it smaller. Okay, there it falls a little bit better. So I have a ball now, and it's got a physics object, a physics component attached to it, and it's got a collider, and it just falls. There's nothing for it to land on yet. So I'm just going to make a cube. I'm going to move it to 0, 0, 0. I'm going to scale it. So basically, I'm trying to make a floor here, right? So I've just quickly bashed up this cube floor. And one of the cool things about Unity is just mocking up things with cubes. It's surprisingly versatile way to just prototype things really quickly. Just resize a cube and throw a script on it and try and make it do something, right? And then I want it to look less like just a gray thing, so I'm going to throw this texture on it. I just drag it onto the thing. There, texture, boom, right? So it's kind of like crazy simple. I'm just going to move this light around to try and make this scene a bit brighter because it's kind of dark. And I'm going to change the camera so that it has a black background. Okay, that looks better to me, I think. I don't know about you guys. I'm going to rename this to capital B ball for no reason, just because I want to. And I'm going to drag in a punch toy model. So here's my little punch toy guy over here. And I'm just going to move him through the scene. What I'm doing when I'm typing here, I'm just going and I'm actually editing the coordinates of the object in 3D space and the rotation and stuff like that. And I don't know where I want them yet, so I'm just going to... And one of the cool things about Unity is the ability to turn any object into something called a prefab. And that's almost like a template. And basically what it means is you can create one prefab and then instantiate, which is a big sounding word, but all it means is like create multiple copies that all reference this original template. So if you change the template, it'll change all the copies. So in a game where you have a gun and you're shooting a bunch of bullets, each bullet would just be an instance, an instantiated instance of the prefab that you've created. So I'm going to make a prefab out of this punch toy so that I can create like infinite punch toys that all behave in the same way as this punch toy. And that way I don't have to keep, doing the same things over and over and over again. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the same physics component, rigid body, on there, and I'm going to put a mesh collider. Now a mesh collider takes the actual 3D mesh and uses that to decide how this object should collide with the environment, right? So let's move this guy up a bit, see what happens when we run the scene. Okay, he hits the ground and he's just staring at you. It's kind of creepy. I know things I shouldn't know. So yeah, you're really going to want to hit that guy with your beach ball. So also the neat thing about this is in Unity, you run the scene, right? We have two different windows where we can see the scene. We have the one down there, that's what the camera is seeing. We have a camera in our scene, and it's looking out there, and that's what it sees. But we have this scene view, and it's the same view that we've been editing everything in. We can actually move the objects around and push them, like so, right? So we can rotate this guy, and then he behaves using his physics components, and he topples over. I don't know, I think it's kind of funny. Anyway. Okay, so what do we want to do next? We've got this guy in here, so we want to make him into a prefab. And that process became really easy. This is my project view over here, and the project in Unity is just a folder on your hard drive. There's nothing, it's not like a fancy file or anything, it's just, those are normal folders. So I'm just making a new folder called prefabs, and all I need to do is just drag an object from the hierarchy view, like an object from the scene, into the prefabs folder, and that makes him into a prefab. So now I can just do this. I've just created another instance of him over there. And I can also do Command D to duplicate. Okay, so we've got 3, right? So that's really, really easy. And if I change one of these guys, say I scale him up, and over here there's this button next to this thing that says prefab. Just hit apply. Now they're all huge, right? So this is how you can like work really, really quickly to, whoa, why am I doing that? Work really, really quickly to set up like basic gameplay behavior and all this kind of stuff. And notice we haven't touched code at all. We haven't typed anything other than just like, coordinates and stuff like that. And we're going to need to actually write some scripts to make the game do interesting things. But that's the other neat thing about Unity is how it's a visual interface for the most part. And so setting up the scene is really easy. You can just see where everything is. You don't have to just imagine in your head and write coordinates into into a text document. So to start writing scripts, we need to, I'm just going to make a new folder. You can organize the projects however you want. This is just the way that I happen to do it. I'm going to right-click, go create C# script. Now there's a bunch of different programming languages that you can use, but C# is probably the best, and there's a variety of reasons for that I'm not going to get into because it's a huge, stupid debate that I don't really care about. So this is a script, and this is the script editor called MonoDevelop, and I'm just going to make a script that controls the player. And so I think what the player should do in this game, he should be able to look around a bit and aim the ball and hit spacebar to throw the ball out. So I'm going to make an object to hold the player. I'm going to call it player. This object is just empty. You see all it has on it is a transform component. It doesn't have any kind of graphics. It's just that little like point in 3D space. And I can already drag this script onto it that I made. So scripts are also components, and that's the really clever thing is you can make your own components and you can throw them on different objects and stuff like that. And so that's how we're gonna go about building our game. Now the player's position here is on the ground for the most part, and we're gonna want to give him a point higher up, so he has like a head. It's just going to be a point in 3D space. So basically the pivot point where he gets to look around. And I think to do that, I might need something. Let's throw another empty object in there. So we can actually put objects inside other objects. And I realize this might be getting kind of confusing, but that's okay. So this point is relative to this stuff. And now what I'm going to do here, I'm going to create this. I love this name. Anyway, sorry. This is an object that's going to hold the ball, basically, in 3D space, so that we can set the ball back to a point. So basically the way I want the gameplay to work is the guy's not going to be able to walk. He's going to look around, right? And he's going to be holding a ball. You're going to be able to see the ball in front of the camera. And then at any point you can hit spacebar, he'll throw the ball will go do whatever it does. You can hit spacebar again, the ball will warp back to this position. So I could probably call this like hands, but I'm going to call it ball holder, whatever. So he's going to have a head position, and this ball holder position, and the camera is going to be part of the head, and this is also going to rotate with the head. And you'll see what I mean when I start rotating this head object there, the camera is rotating, right? And I'm going to want the ball to go inside this ball holder object, and so I can rotate the head and rotate all this other stuff. And I'm going to move this so that it's in proper place here. I'm going to move this guy over. And all I'm doing here is just moving objects around so that I get them in the right place. It's not very exciting. Okay, so maybe that's where he'll be sort of holding the ball. So you can kind of see I've got this little camera guy. That's like where his head is. This is where his hands are going to be. And it's just first person, so we don't need to actually see the character or anything like that, right? So if I wanted to have him walk around, he would move from this point. It moves everything that's attached to that. I can rotate the head separately. So that's all good. And we've set that up without looking at any code, right? And now we're going to actually want to control the head movement through the player. So this is where it gets to the point where I probably can't explain things very easily without going into too much detail. But basically what I'm going to do is let the script reference the head object and do things with it. So I'm going to want to rotate the head. And all I'm going to do here is I'm just going to be giving it an angle offset. If you look up to the upper right there and look at the y coordinate on the rotation, you see how it's changing when I rotate the head, right? Basically, I just want to write code that does that, but based on input from the keyboard. Okay, so let's see here. We want to get the horizontal axis from the input, and this is going to be confusing, but that's okay. I'm going to call that H. Vertical. Okay, so when I was rotating this way, which is what I want the horizontal keyboard input to do, that was the y-axis. So y is the second one here. And the other one should be that, I think. We're going to multiply this by rotate speed and delta time, and I don't have time to explain what that means. But that's why we're starting a user group that you can come and actually learn how this stuff works in more detail. Oh, that actually compiled. Awesome. Okay. So I've hooked this stuff up, and I don't know if it's going to work, so let's find out. See what it does. Oh, it's very slow. Oh, it's so slow. So the cool thing about Unity is I created this variable, and a variable is a parameter of a script that you can change, basically, called rotate speed. When I wrote this script, it's multiplying the movement from the keyboard. And it shows up here magically in the editor. So this is kind of the cool thing about Unity. It's integrated. So I can just, while I'm playing, slide this value up. I can set it to like 100. Oh, that's way faster. And he looks really drunk for some reason. And I think that's because something is probably offset. Oh, I know what it is. Space.self. No. So basically what I was doing wrong is I was rotating, I think, the entire object instead of, oops. This is the fun part about programming, is that you get everything wrong. And then you have to actually figure out how things are supposed to work. And it's kind of almost like being in a detective movie. But the murderer is you from the past. I don't know if that's working better or not. Also, when you change values while the game is running, you change, like, say if I change rotate speed to like 9,000, which does, wah! If I hit play, then it just undoes all my changes. So it goes back to being 100. So you can kind of just play around with stuff in the play view, and oh, yeah. So he's still kind of weird. That's okay. We'll live with it for now. We're going to make this ball kinematic, and all that means is it's going to be frozen in space. So now the ball should actually move with us, hopefully. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to write some code really quickly so that you can actually shoot the ball out. So transform ball. What I'm doing here is I'm just creating another parameter, another variable, another thing that I can link in here. You see it shows up right here. I've created this parameter ball. And I can just drag this guy in here. And I'm sure this is confusing, but that's all right. Get. What do I want? Button down jump. I think jump by default is linked to the space bar. So ball.rigidbody.add. Whoop. Add force. Transform.forward times ball force. Force mode dot acceleration. So basically I'm just telling it to give the rigid body component of the ball.rigidbody, force in a particular direction. The direction happens to be transform.forward, which is the direction that the player is facing. And that's actually incorrect. I want to give it the direction that the head is facing. So I fixed a bug just by thinking about it. And I need a ball force parameter here. A float just means a decimal number. Again, probably really confusing, and the backstory behind that is interesting and would take like half an hour to explain. Okay, so we've got our ball linked in, we've got our input linked up, we've got a force value, and nothing happens. And that's because I haven't told the ball to unfreeze itself. Its kinematic is false. I also want to tell it to detach itself from the player. Yay! that was the most pathetic like ball throw though. It was like so I can crank up the ball force, right? Because that should be like a kid's TV show. So that's a little bit better, right? There it goes, rolling off into the distance. And the way that the collisions are happening, I didn't have to write any code to make the character react to the ball or anything. Just because I have the colliders on it and the rigid bodies, they'll hit each other properly and that'll all work out. So that's kind of another place where Unity can potentially save you some time. So what else do we want to do with this? We want to make it so that the ball can come back to you, right? So if the ball is attached to something, then we're going to throw it, right? Because that means that we're holding it. So ball.parent, basically the parent object is the thing that an object is attached to. So in this case, the ball holder, if you will. So we can actually, one of the things you can do in code is these two slashes, right? That lets you write whatever you want, and the program will ignore it. So you're like, haha, you suck, program. It'll ignore you. It won't get mad at you for doing that. But basically what you usually use it for, instead of writing insults, is just leaving little notes for yourself so you can remember what things do if they happen to be a little bit complicated. Generally, it's better to try and write code that can explain itself, but sometimes it's helpful to leave a little comment. So here I might be like, if the ball is being held by the player, that's what this really means. Even though it looks probably like voodoo to most people, it's like, oh, well, okay, I guess that does that. And then if the ball is not being held by the player, and this is happening when we hit the space bar. So when we hit the space bar, we're not attached, we're going to have to give ourselves a reference to the thing we want to attach the ball to, and that's called ball holder, as we all know by now. And so we're going to go link that object in, just like we linked in the other objects. Okay, so ball.position equals ball holder dot position. We're going to move the position of the ball back to the hand position. We're going to set the parent object back to the ball holder, and we're going to tell the ball to stop reacting to physics. Let's see if this works. Okay. Oh yeah, sweet. So now I can throw the ball out, and then whenever I want, I can hit space, and the ball comes back. And I still feel like the throw is not powerful enough, because I really want to send these guys flying. I can also increase the mass of the ball, which will probably change the way this works too. Yeah, oh, there we go. And I kind of want to see like more of this stuff going on. So I'm just going to duplicate these guys as a group, and I'm just going to keep spawning some of them. And then let's see how many we can do before my computer crashes. Okay, that's cool. All right. So they bounce off each other, sort of. I've noticed that this model has some weird collision issues, and I think that's probably just part of the model. Maybe some of the data isn't perfect on it or something, but for the most part, it works pretty well, I think. So that's our basic demo, and if anyone has anything that they want me to try, because one of the fun things about making games is, especially indie games or prototypes, you don't necessarily need to go in with a plan. Like you can start with this idea of, oh, okay, I have this ball and I'm going to hit these guys, and then you can just start, you know, messing around and creating maybe like a level or something. Like maybe this has a ceiling or something like that, and you can just kind of like make it up as you go along and see what happens. And the benefit of using Unity is this is super fast, and I can even start, you know, doing weird things like rotating the floor. You know, while the game is playing and stuff like that. So it can actually be incredibly fast to develop stuff because of this method where you don't have to, typically like the game that Kevin mentioned before, Aquaria, took us, you know, like 2 years to make, but I had been working on a game engine for a long time before that, and that was just, you know, thousands and thousands of lines of code. But the process of building the game, we're using our own tools that we built from scratch, and it would just take ages to go into the code, change something, recompile. It takes, you know, at least like 45 seconds to compile a big project, and then you get to see what your changes did. And then if they're not right, you have to go back, change the stuff, wait another 45 seconds. 45 seconds doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're doing it constantly, it gets really aggravating, and it really slows down your creative vibes. You know, so this is way more really easy to just feel like you're getting your hands on something and molding it and messing around with it, especially with the way that the parameters here are exposed, so I can just keep tweaking. Tweaking is super important to game development. It's not just about getting all the assets in place and all the code in place. It's about being able to really quickly fine-tune different knobs, and that can totally make or break a game. And when you go through play testing and stuff and you see different players react totally differently if you tweak this jump parameter slightly this way versus slightly that way. A game like Super Mario Brothers 1 is a super finely tuned game where the characters jump, the kind of jumps that Mario can do. It's not just like most platformers at that time, the character would run like this, right? And just do like little triangle hops. But Mario can jump up and almost do loop-de-loops with how flexible his controls are. So I have a friend who actually teaches a game development course in Phoenix, and he has an exercise where he'll put people next to Super Mario Brothers 1, and they play it for a while, and then they have to go to a demo that he's created of the same mechanics of Super Mario. You have a little guy, you run around, but you have all these knobs that you can control, and your job is to tune them to make it behave almost as similar as Super Mario Brothers 1. And it's really interesting because the values are not like real values at all from real life. Like you'll be tweaking gravity, and you'll turn gravity way, 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 way down, and you'll turn the jump power up, and you'll turn the air friction, and there's all these different values. And so that's sort of what Unity facilitates, is this ability. I can just go in here and decide, okay, the aiming is way too slow, I'm going to tweak it up slightly. And, try and find the perfect values for this while I'm actually playing the game. So I think that's sort of one of the most powerful features of it. There are a few other things I just wanted to introduce. There's something called the Asset Store now. And that's basically a store that's integrated into Unity where you can go buy scripts and components that other people have made and just stick them in your game and start running with them and start using them. And I was really, really cynical and skeptical about this idea because I thought it was probably going to be used for just like ugly 3D models, and everyone would throw these ugly 3D models in their game and all the games would start looking the same. But there's some really, really cool scripts that I've been using lately. One is called Rage Spline, which basically lets you create 2D graphics in the same style as Flash, and also turn them into solid objects. So basically you're creating these curves, and you can build entire levels out of these curve shapes, and it's super fast, and then turn physics on, and then automatically it's a level. And then the other script is called 2D Toolkit. It handles rendering sprites and combining sprites into textures and all this stuff, and it makes 2D really wonderful. So I know Devin before was saying he wouldn't recommend Unity for 2D on iOS, but I think with those tools it might be getting to the point where it's almost as easy as Flash or potentially easier. I don't know, but that stuff is actually really cool now. It's kind of like the App Store, but for Unity code and assets. So when Devin mentioned earlier in his first talk, he was talking about how Unity can export to Flash. This is going to come out soon. Unity can target almost any platform except Linux and a couple others, but it can export to Windows, Mac, Android, iOS, and the web. It has its own web plugin, but this is where it can export to Flash. So anyone who has the Flash plugin, which is everyone, can play Unity content on the web. So this is a major thing. This is going to be like the turning of the tide or something. So we were kind of thinking that this would be a really good time to start a user group. And basically, my vision of a user group, which might be kind of different, I'm not sure if it is or not, but anybody can make games. That's what I kind of want it to be about, because I think we're at the point where the technology is just about easy enough to use that pretty much anyone can start playing around with different physics objects, combining different things, working with artists that may not have to know coding. All they have to do is throw their model into the project, right? And so that's really what I want to encourage. Any age group. I love projects that kids can work on and senior citizens can work on and stuff. I think that's awesome, and I think we're getting to the point where this is going to be possible. So that's sort of what our group is about. It's called the Winnipeg Unity User Group. This is the URL. WUG. We're developing a cute mascot called WUG, just because we can. No real reason. But if you head to that site, you can sign up to our mailing list, and we'll be posting more updates and stuff. We'll probably have meetings at Red River, and we might go hang out at the King's Head after or something like that. and we're going to be flying in people as guests, hopefully. We're going to be doing a lot more on-hands things eventually. First, we'll probably just be demoing stuff and talking about projects that use it, but it'd be really cool to get to the point where we actually, you know, are all working on different games, sharing ideas, or even something where, you know, maybe each month we vote on a game concept, and then Devin and I can work on a little prototype to demonstrate like how that game might actually work in practice or something. There's tons of really cool stuff we could do. So if you're interested at all in making games, I think this would be a really cool thing to come out to. It's going to be free. It's just really to try and boost the Winnipeg game development community. So I don't know if you guys have anything that you want me to try out in this game prototype, or if you have any questions about Unity at all. You can also go to my site if you want to ask me questions. It's actually Infinite Ammo, not Infinitimo, which somebody actually thought it was once. So Twitter, Infinite Ammo with an underscore so you don't get confused. But I get because I have Unity tutorials on YouTube, I get tons of questions from like 12-year-old kids from foreign countries that are just like, you know, like one-line things like, how you make game? And I'm like, well, first step, create a cube, I guess, I don't know. So, but you know, no question is too stupid if you're interested in this. I'd be into helping you figure it out. And I'm sure Devin is too, and a bunch of other people. Question?
For people here who don't necessarily make games, maybe make apps or something else, is this a useful tool for them?
It's kind of a useful tool for things that are non-games. There have been some cool like interactive weather apps. Like I think news companies have used stuff back when the BP oil spill was going on. They built an interactive BP oil spill Unity web app thing to sort of explain what was going on. And we've used it to create the launcher for the Winitron 1000, the arcade machine in the LoPub. And that's not really necessarily a game, it's more like a UI. So it can do a bunch of other stuff too. It's not just games, but it was definitely built to create games, and that's why it's one of the best tools, because there's just no weird BS stuff. You start with a completely empty scene, and you can create whatever you want. It's not like something like Unreal Game Engine that was built only to make first-person shooters, and you have to kind of change it around to make it do other types of games. You can just start with a blank slate and go nuts. Any other questions? Yes?
Have you found using one of those keypads with numbers helping in the process?
Like a number pad?
Yeah, number pad.
So I have this keyboard. It does not have a number pad, and I don't really miss it too much. You don't really use a number pad much in Unity for any shortcuts. But if you're using Blender, which is a 3D program, you definitely want a number pad. But I don't know if you're using that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the other question I had was there was something from your tutorial page there about Monocle, 2D game engine or something?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting because I have kind of a love-hate relationship with Unity, which has turned more into love as time goes on, as most relationships do. But also we have kids, so I can't really just run out on Unity but for a while I got really frustrated because version 3 point whatever, blah, 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 had a lot of issues on Windows, and I was using Windows at the time. It was crashing a lot, and it was doing a bunch of stupid things. So I started writing my own game engine. I started having an affair with the Monocle engine. And we started writing our own game engine with a bunch of friends all over the world, and we created this little bunch of prototypes. I ported my game over to it, and it was pretty cool. But when I went back and looked at Unity again, I noticed that's when I stumbled across the Rage Spline and the 2D Toolkit tools. And those are pretty much doing exactly what I wanted to do in my engine, except they were doing it in Unity, and it was easier and faster and all this stuff. So it's kind of like, yeah. Because I was writing this whole like path editor thing to create levels, and that's basically what Rage Spline does. And you can buy that for I think like $50 or something, throw it into your Unity project, and you get that.
So Unity was going to the gym. She was looking good.
Yeah, Unity had been working out. She had solved some of her emotional issues, and I was like, I love you, Unity. I'll never leave you again. But I don't know. So yeah, I've been working on that for a while, and I'm not sure what will happen to it. This is an open source game engine, and I was really hoping that we could build something that younger people could use to get into game development. And that was kind of the passion behind that, was like, let's build it and make it open source so anyone can edit it and all that stuff. And I think it was a really cool idea, and I hope somebody either picks up that project or creates their own offshoot of it or does something different but similar. But just based on the amount of time it takes to write an engine, I'm not sure if it's worth it. There's just so much effort that goes into it. And it's still not as fast as using Unity to prototype because, again, all the things I was showing you where I can just jump back and forth in between these really, really fast. You almost don't notice. The Unity is actually in the background taking my code and compiling it into bytecode. It's turning it into things the machine can understand. And on most projects, you don't even notice that that's happening. It happens like in the corner.
What triggers the compilation?
If I change a file, so I'll go in here and I'll make an error. So there's an error that will not compile. We'll save the file, go back. You see, it was done. Now we only have one script, so that's why it's fast. If you have errors in your code, they'll pop up here, right? And you can just be like, okay, unexpected symbol, am. Double click, okay, hi, okay, apparently this is okay. But apparently this is not. I don't know why that is. It'll warp you right to the line where the error is. Right, so say I made like a mistake that was not as obvious, and people make these mistakes all the time. I still make these mistakes. People who are just starting out make these mistakes and they think that Unity is broken. On every one of my tutorials, somebody emails me and be like, oh, Unity is broken because I got this error message. I'm like, are you sure you typed the script correctly? Yeah, I typed it exactly right. Can you send me your script? And then, of course, they've made a typo. And it's something like that, right? Like, okay, I typed F by accident, right? Go back. Oh, there's an error. Type Unity engine.transform does not contain a definition for rigid body. So it'll tell you, like, hey, I don't know what that is. And it'll tell you what you wrote and warp you to the line. So it's not too hard to figure out what you did wrong and fix it and go back and then it should compile and work. So there's also way more advanced stuff you can do. You can play music on your cell phone. It's okay. Now, I was doing that. I made the cell phone do that through Unity, which is a plugin you can buy for $10. You can, what was I saying? Oh, you can blah, 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 blah. More advanced stuff for debugging. So that was just basically like, I had an error. I could jump in here. I can actually output stuff from here. I can go like debug.log. Hi, I am a debug log. Transform.position. You can put any variable in there. It'll output it through the log system. And basically, you'll see at the bottom it says, hi, I'm a debug log. Whoa. And then it will turn the screen off for some reason. And then it will go through cycles of color. Cool. But basically this is going to output a position of the player, which I can just change here by moving the player around. So you see the numbers at the bottom there are changing. So that's just one way that you can sort of spit out some information about what's happening in the code to see, oh, is my code working or not. So sometimes I'll do things like, I'm not really a very good programmer, so I'll kind of, sometimes I'll be like, oh, if false, let's see, do really important thing. Will that ever happen? Well, no, because false is never true, and I have to explain what if statements are to explain that. I'm sorry. But basically, like, I could put something in here and be like, okay, do I see that message pop up when I run the code? Does that message show up as kind of a sanity check to say, where is the code going? Okay, I didn't get a message, so it must not have hit this point. Why not? Oh, because this is false. So I've changed it to true. Let's see if this works. Do a really important thing. Okay, good. So that's kind of like one way you can go through debugging, but there's a more advanced way where you can actually step through the code line by line and jump into the game and see what's happening and then go back to the code. And that's real debugging, and that's a feature that Unity also has now. There's also something that's a bit easier to understand is the profiler, which is super cool. Basically, let's open it here. I can't get it at the same time because I need to drag it over here to my scene view. It's basically going to show me graphs of what is happening while the game is running and what is taking the most time. So if your game is running slow, you can just look at this graph and you can be like, okay, camera render is taking 70%. That's okay. That means most of our time is spent rendering and not in scripts. So you can basically drill down and see exactly where your scripts are going wrong and fix them. Any other questions?
Is it possible to reference like .NET assemblies?
Yeah. So one of the things that's confusing about learning C# with Unity is that it uses something called .NET, and it gives you access to all these other functions that aren't actually part of Unity. They're part of a whole other library. And yeah, you can get into a bunch of different libraries. I'm not sure if assemblies are part of it, but there's tons of different data structures you can use and cool stuff.
Yeah, that's going to have to be our last question, just because we've gone a little bit over. But please feel free to hang around and ask Alec any questions that you have. Alec, well done. That was amazing. Again, you don't have to go anywhere, or if you want to go somewhere, maybe ply in with some nice tasty beverage down the street or something like that. That works too. Thank you all for coming out tonight. I hope you had a good time. And if you too would like to become a future demoer, please let Kathy know. She's the one that has coordinated, that coordinates all these types of events. So thank you for coming out and have a good night, guys. Thanks.